They thought I was a gold digger who trapped their son. At our first family dinner, they handed me a check to disappear. What they didn't know, I owned the building they were standing in. My name is Diana Barrett, and this is how I taught my husband's family the most expensive lesson of their lives. Before we dive into this story, if you love tales about karma and hidden identities, hit that like button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to subscribe, because what you're about to hear takes twists you won't see coming. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I'll never forget the weight of those double shifts at Mercy General Hospital. My scrubs always smelled like antiseptic and coffee, and my feet ached in ways I didn't know were possible. But I loved it. There was something pure about helping people, about being needed for what I could do, not what I had. My daughter Lily was 5 years old then, with bright eyes that saw the world as this beautiful, magical place. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, and to anyone watching, we were just another struggling single mother and daughter trying to make it in New York City. That was exactly what I wanted them to see. The truth, I was worth $340 million. My parents came to this country with nothing but dreams and calloused hands. They cleaned offices at night and saved every penny until they could buy their first property. Then another, then another. By the time I was 10, they owned half a block in Manhattan. When I turned 28, they retired and handed me an empire I never asked for, but learned to manage better than they ever imagined. Barrett Holdings owns commercial real estate across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Shopping plazas, office buildings, luxury apartments. My signature is on leases worth hundreds of millions. But money had already cost me everything once before. My ex-boyfriend, the man I thought I'd marry, only saw dollar signs when he looked at me. When I discovered he'd been bragging to his friends about landing a rich girl, about never having to work another day in his life, something inside me broke. So I made a decision. I created another life, a simple life. I wanted to know if anyone could love Diana the woman, not Diana the heiress. That's when I met James. He walked into the community clinic where I volunteered on weekends, looking completely out of place in his tailored suit. He was there representing his pharmaceutical company, discussing a donation program. But what struck me wasn't his expensive watch or his confident smile. It was the way he spoke to Mrs. Chen, an elderly patient who barely spoke English. He knelt down, took his time, made sure she understood her medication instructions. There was kindness in his eyes that money can't buy. We started talking over terrible clinic coffee. He told me about his work as an executive at Whitmore Pharmaceuticals, about his passion for making healthcare accessible. I told him I was a nurse with a 5-year-old daughter, working hard to give her a better life. Every word was technically true, just not the whole truth. Over the next 10 months, we fell in love. Real love. The kind where he'd show up at my apartment with pizza after my night shifts, where he'd read bedtime stories to Lily in silly voices that made her giggle uncontrollably. James was everything I'd hoped to find. Genuine, kind, present. Then he proposed, and everything got complicated. When James told me he wanted me to meet his family, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Nervousness, maybe. He explained that the Whitmores were, in his words, traditional. His father, Gerald, owned a pharmaceutical distribution company. His mother, Patricia, sat on the boards of half the charity organizations in Manhattan. His sister, Claudia, had her own fashion line. They were wealthy, respected, and according to James, a little particular about certain things. I knew what he meant. I'd faced it my whole life. The day I met them, I made sure to arrive exactly as they expected. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic, the one I kept specifically for my other life. I wore my nurse scrubs because I'd told them I was coming straight from a shift. My hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and I carried Lily on my hip like we'd just come from the public library. The Whitmore estate in Westchester was everything you'd imagine. Sprawling gardens, a circular driveway, the kind of house that whispered old money with every brick. Patricia answered the door in a white linen outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile was polite, practiced, and didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Diana," she said, looking me up and down like I was a stain she was trying to identify. "How quaint. You came straight from work?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied softly, playing my part perfectly. "I hope that's all right." My shift ran a bit long. Dinner was a masterclass in subtle humiliation. Gerald asked about my financial situation over the salad course. Patricia made comments about how brave I was to raise Lily alone on a service worker's salary. Claudia actually laughed when I mentioned shopping at thrift stores, then tried to cover it with a cough. James defended me, but I could see him shrinking under his family's judgment, becoming smaller with each cutting remark. The worst moment came when Lily, nervous and trying to be careful, knocked over her juice. The glass shattered, and deep red liquid spread across Patricia's pristine white tablecloth. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, grabbing napkins, feeling that familiar rage building in my chest. But I kept my face humble, apologetic, exactly what they expected. "It's fine," Patricia said, in a tone that meant it absolutely wasn't. These things happen when children aren't accustomed to formal dining. I held Lily close that night as she cried, apologizing over and over, and I made a promise to myself. They would learn. Eventually, they would all learn. But nothing prepared me for what came next. 1 week before our wedding, Patricia called and asked to meet me privately. She and Gerald arrived at my small apartment with a man in an expensive suit who turned out to be their lawyer. I knew immediately this wasn't a friendly visit. I quietly pressed record on my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Gerald didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Diana, we're going to be frank with you. You seem like a nice girl, but you're not right for our son. You come from different worlds. You have a child from another relationship, financial struggles, and frankly, no prospects beyond your current position." Patricia leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Darling, we're prepared to offer you $500,000. Walk away now, and you'll have more money than you'd see in a lifetime of nursing. Give James the chance to find someone more suitable." I felt something crack inside me, not my resolve, but the last bit of benefit of the doubt I'd been giving these people. I looked at them, these wealthy people who thought money could buy anything, who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. "Then you'll sign a prenuptial agreement," Gerald said, sliding paper across my coffee table. "These are non-negotiable. If you divorce James, you get $50,000 per year, nothing from the Whitmore family assets, no claim to James's inheritance." I picked up the papers and read through them slowly. They'd thought of everything, or so they believed. Every clause was designed to keep the poor nurse in her place, to ensure I could never touch their precious family money. I looked up at them, and for the first time I smiled, really smiled. "I'll sign," I said, "and the wedding is still happening." Patricia looked confused. Gerald seemed satisfied. They had no idea what was coming. Our wedding was small, intimate, exactly as I'd planned it. But the Whitmores turned it into a circus of disrespect. They arrived 30 minutes late, dressed in black like they were attending a funeral. Patricia's whispers were just loud enough to hear. "At least it's cheap. We won't waste much money on this mistake." During our vows, Gerald's phone rang, and he actually answered it, conducting business while I promised to love his son forever. Claudia posted photos on social media with captions that made my blood boil. But I smiled through it all, because I knew something they didn't. The game was almost over. 6 weeks after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant. When I told James, he was overjoyed. When I told his family, they arranged another meeting. This time, they wanted to revise the prenup. Make it stronger, they said. More protective. They offered me an allowance of $50,000 a year in case of divorce, like I was a child who needed pocket money. "That's probably more than your nursing salary anyway," Claudia said with a smirk. I signed everything they put in front of me, every document, every clause, every insulting term. and I smiled the entire time because I'd already consulted with my lawyers. Every single one of these papers was designed to protect Whitmore family assets from me. But I had no interest in Whitmore assets. I never did. 2 months later, Gerald's company was negotiating for a new headquarters. They'd been in talks with a real estate company called Barrett Holdings for weeks, discussing a prime Manhattan location worth $45 million over 15 years. Gerald was excited. This building would cement his company's prestige, position them among the elite pharmaceutical distributors in the country. The final meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The entire Whitmore family decided to attend, including James, who'd been kept in the dark about most business dealings. They arrived at the luxury high-rise in Midtown, already celebrating their victory. I watched them on the security cameras as they entered the building I'd owned for 7 years. Gerald was pontificating about negotiating terms. Patricia was already planning a party to celebrate. Claudia was taking selfies in the marble lobby. James looked uncomfortable, like he always did when his family got too self-congratulatory. They took the elevator to the 42nd floor, to the conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. My assistant offered them coffee, sparkling water, all the courtesies. They waited, impatient and entitled, for the owner of Barrett Holdings to arrive. Then I walked in. I wore a custom suit that cost $15,000. My hair was styled, my makeup perfect. I was flanked by my lawyers, my CFO, and my head of acquisitions. I watched their faces cycle through confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, horror. "Thank you for meeting with me," I said, my voice calm and professional. "I'm Diana Barrett, CEO of Barrett Holdings. I believe we have some business to discuss." Patricia actually fainted. Gerald turned a shade of red I didn't know was possible. Claudia's mouth opened and closed, like a fish drowning in air. And James, my sweet James, looked at me with eyes full of questions I'd have to answer later. I didn't give them time to recover. "Before we discuss your lease proposal, I thought we should address some previous interactions." I nodded to my assistant, who began playing the recording. Their own voices filled the room, offering me $500,000 to disappear, calling me financially unstable, saying I'd never see this much money in a lifetime. Gerald tried to interrupt. "Diana, we can explain." "I'm not finished," I said, and the steel in my voice made him stop. "Let's talk about Barrett Holdings. We own 63 commercial properties across 3 states. The building you're currently sitting in, mine. The building where Whitmore Pharmaceuticals currently operates, also mine. You've been paying rent to one of my subsidiary companies for the past 4 years. Those boutique locations where Claudia's fashion line operates, all mine." I walked to the window, looking out at the city my parents had conquered with hard work and sacrifice. "That allowance you offered me? $50,000 a year? I make that in interest, daily." I turned back to face them. "So let's discuss the lease terms for your new headquarters. Market rate is $2.8 million per year. Given your company's financials, I'd say that's more than fair." "This is blackmail," Gerald sputtered. "No," I corrected him. "This is business. However, I'm willing to offer an alternative arrangement. You can have the building at 20% below market rate, but only if you meet certain conditions. First, a public apology printed in the New York Times, acknowledging your prejudice and discrimination. Second, a $1 million donation to establish a nursing scholarship fund for underprivileged students in my mother's name. Third, written personal apologies to me and my daughter for every insult, every slight, every moment you made us feel less than human." The room was silent, except for Patricia's quiet sobbing. "You have 48 hours to decide," I said. "After that, the building goes to the second bidder, and your company can find new headquarters elsewhere. Oh, and Gerald, your current building's lease is up for renewal in 6 months. I'd start looking for alternatives if I were you." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, leaving them to drown in the consequences of their own cruelty. That evening, James came home. We sat in our living room, the nice one in my penthouse apartment that I'd finally revealed to him. And we talked for hours. He felt betrayed by my deception, and I understood that. But I needed him to understand why I did it. I needed to know you loved me, I told him, tears finally falling. Not my money, not my status, just me. And I needed to know if you'd stand by me when your family didn't. I paused. You didn't. Not at first. He couldn't argue with that. James had let his family disrespect me, humiliate me, treat my daughter like she was worthless. He'd been complicit in his silence. But you're here now, I continued. And if you want to build a real marriage, we start over. With honesty. With courage. With the understanding that I will never let anyone, including your family, treat me or our children as less than we are. It took time, but James stepped up. He set boundaries with his family that should have existed from the beginning. He became the man I'd hoped he could be. Gerald and Patricia chose the apology option. The notice appeared in the Times 3 days later, and the nursing scholarship was established. Claudia lost her boutique leases when they came up for renewal. I didn't renew them out of spite, but because she needed to learn what it meant to build something without family money protecting her. The Whitmores signed the lease at market rate. No special treatment, no family discount. Business is business. Now, I wake up every morning next to a man who finally understands what I knew from the beginning. Love isn't about money or status or family names. It's about respect, partnership, and having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. My daughter Lily is 7 now, and she'll never have to pretend to be anything less than she is. My son, little James, will grow up knowing that people's worth isn't measured by their bank accounts. And the Whitmores, they learned the most expensive lesson of their lives. Never judge someone by their appearance or circumstances. That nurse in thrift store clothes might just own the ground you're standing on. That struggling mother might be the one who holds your future in her hands. Everyone has a story you know nothing about. And sometimes, karma doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes, karma owns the whole damn building. So that's my story. The truth I've been carrying for years, finally told. If this gave you chills, if you felt every moment of that boardroom reveal, smash that like button right now. What would you have done in my position? Would you have revealed yourself sooner or played the long game like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more incredible karma stories like this, hit subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Trust me, the next story will blow your mind even more. Thanks for watching, and remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know who you're really talking to. Until next time.